fortunate to have with us today Paul Wagner, the president of Soil Foodweb of New York. And Paul has a website that I encourage you all to go to follow up on the information he's about to present. Paul?
Thank you, everybody. Okay, so love them and leave them. And this is the science part of it, so I hope everybody had a little bit of coffee at least. So your average forest drops about 4,000 pounds per acre of leaves. Anybody here use organic fertilizer on their property? What's about your application rate? Even something like corn gluten, which has a very high application rate, about 10 pounds per 1,000 square feet per application. The leaves that are normally dropping, and don't forget, trees don't know that they're not in a forest. We put them in a landscape, and by taking the leaves away, we're basically starving them. But about 100 pounds of leaves per 1,000 square feet of root zone. That's a lot of resource to be removing. So the whole basic idea from the health of the plant perspective, why to leave the leaves in place, is that we mimic the natural ecosystem in the landscape. We do these great landscape designs, but generally we can do the same thing below ground, and we don't always pay as close attention to below ground. And a lot of those things you can't really see without a microscope. So leaves are food resources for different critters in the soil. All these critters help keep the plants healthy. So you have bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes. These are things that early in my horticultural career I would point a spray gun at to kill. And now I'm converted, so now I'm trying to encourage everybody to actually incorporate these things into their plant management. So here's why the soil is so important. Healthy plants will put as much as 80% of their energy into the root system. A lot of that energy, the roots, obviously goes into the growth of roots, but a lot of it goes into the plants will actually release foods for beneficial microbes, for those bacteria, those fungi, and those sorts of things. So that's just ryegrass, by the way. So that's what our root systems should look like. So in this picture, what you're basically seeing is, as a root grows, it's going to release these things, these foods, into the soil to grow bacteria and fungi. Okay, bacteria and fungi are decomposers. That's what's going to break your leaves down, and they have all sorts of other benefits, and I'm going to go through some of those. So they create basically a shield around your root system. And if you notice there's a little disease spore on the far side, the Pythium, that's something that needs to actually sense all the foods that are coming off the root system in order to germinate and grow and attack the root. So the healthier we can keep our plants, the more this bacteria and fungi can actually create this shield around the root system. This is a root tip, actively growing, and it just gives you that picture to back up how much is actually coming right out of the root zone as foods for soil organisms. When you spend as much time in a laboratory as I do, these are the kind of things that get you excited. This is a nematode-trapping fungus. The long strand is a fungus. That's a root-feeding nematode. That's a nematode that's actually trying to attack your plants. So what the fungus does is it releases foods that the nematode thinks, wow, I got a plant here, I'm going to come attack. And then as the nematode kind of swims through, the fungus decomposes the nematode. Okay? So the nematode swims through the hoop starts to constrict, and then the fungus chokes off the nematode. So it is really a dog-eat-dog world under our feet. Okay, so bacteria and fungi, they're decomposers. They're things that break down organic matter. When you put down your organic fertilizer, when you put leaves down, these are the guys that actually do the breaking down and turning it into organic matter or compost. This is what's really active in a compost pile. This is a bacterium. And just again, I'm going to go over a couple of different functions, what these guys do. So that's the body of the bacterium, that sphere. These little things on the side, that's actually a little slime layer that, it's a nice word, I know, breakfast was not too long ago, but that's what it is. It's a slime layer that bacteria put around themselves to stick themselves to their food resource, okay? And this is why, by the way, when you're going organic and you hear things like organic fertilizer won't leach, this is why. Bacteria is the most concentrated form of nitrogen on the planet. And when bacteria break down that organic fertilizer that you put on your soil, because it sticks itself in place, that's why that form of nitrogen will not leach. So as the water moves through, they stay in place. This is a leaf. This is an actual leaf sitting on the soil surface. And you can see all these strands of fungi growing on the leaf. Okay, so they colonize the leaf and they start to decompose it. One of the arguments we get a lot of times when we ask people to leave leaves is, oh, they stay around forever, they never break down, and that's really not the case once you have the correct sets of critters to start to break them down. Once they're in the landscape, they can process leaves pretty quickly. These are soil aggregates, these tiny little pieces, and if anybody's ever been out in the forest or even planting in your yard and you take a handful of soil and you see that nice crumbly structure, it's bacteria that actually, because they create those glues, they stick the sand, silt, and clay particles and the organic matter together, and they make these aggregates, okay? Fungi then will wrap themselves around the aggregates, creating macro aggregates, larger aggregates. So, and these are all things that are fed by having leaves in your soil. So what's a better mulching material? And I'm not anti-wood chip, by the way. But there's your leaves, there's your wood chips. You notice this tree was planted 4 years prior to the picture being taken, and the burlap is still there, okay, after doing a little digging. So clearly there's not great soil here. The leaves are generally cleaned up every year. This is a college in Pennsylvania that we converted organic. But the wood chips aren't really helping. So they're not really decomposing, so it's a bigger soil problem. This is actually just a picture of, here's leaves used as a mulch around a birch tree, okay, and throughout a landscape. And by the way, birch tree hasn't had a leaf miner or borers in about 15 years because the leaves have been left. Now the interesting part about that is birch leaf miner is an insect that spends the winter in the fallen leaf. So you would think, wow, we raked up all the leaves underneath that tree. This tree should be loaded with these insects. But what happens is, because of all the decomposers that are in the soil, the leaves shred, and they're actually unprotected. And like I said, it's a dog-eat-dog world. That insect doesn't make it through the winter anymore because it's a food resource for something else. Here's, this is actually pine mulch. Okay, that's used on many, many estates. And again, it's a great food for all these different microbes. This is actually a mite that's feeding on fungus, but it's also helping to shred the leaves. I sell these if you want. I have some in the car. But seriously, once you put the leaves down, you'd be shocked at how many critters will come in and say, wow, I have food now, and they'll come in and process all the leaves. And that guy's going to shred. One of the problems with wood chips is it's not a very diverse food resource. So you can see all these mushrooms. They all look exactly the same. And I'm not saying the mushrooms are a bad thing. That's good. That indicates that there are some type of beneficial fungi there. The problem is, in a forest, you might have 40,000 different species of fungi. And again, your trees rely on them, on those different species. Trees don't realize that they're not in a forest. So when you take them out and all they have is just wood chips, and now you have one species that dominates, it's not going to be able to do all the jobs that all 40,000 are doing in a forest. So having a little diversity in your mulching materials is a really good thing. One other thing that you'll get from leaves that you will not get from, or the difference between leaves and a more bulky mulch is the surface area. If you look at, and I just use a deck of cards as an example, the box of a deck that a deck of cards comes in is about just a little larger than the actual card as far as the surface area, top and bottom and sides. But the 52 cards, you think about all the surface area combined, and then you go back to that leaf, think about the surface area with all the, with one wood chip, if you want to just say pound for pound of wood chips is going to have, there'll be exponentially more surface area and food for microbes in a pound of leaves versus a pound of wood chips. And what that's going to ultimately mean is healthier trees or healthier lawn. Okay, so here's forest litter. Look at all that white stuff that's in between all the leaf litter. That's all beneficial fungus. So the whole mat is just loaded with it. It's what's holding it together at this point. We can mimic this, and we do in many cases. But people clean up the leaves, then they pay us to come in and replace that food resource, which is great. It's great for business. And I'm not saying that some of it won't still be necessary. There are still applications that are going to need to be made. But you can certainly reduce that need by leaving some of the leaves.